What's up? Seth Mosley here. We're on the Made It Music Podcast, and today we've got Jody Williams. I'm going to intro him here in just a second, but it is an episode that you're not going to want to miss. Stick around all the way to the end. This guy is a music industry veteran, has been around the block, and is doing a lot of stuff here. But before we jump in, wanted to let you know about something super awesome that we do here at Full Circle Music through Bridge House, which is our partner production company. We offer professional production services for demos and masters, and I want to let you know, so if this sounds like something you're interested in, you should definitely contact support at fullcirclemusic.com if you have a project that you would like to have professional production for. All right, today our guest is Jody Williams. Jody is a music industry veteran. He's a former VP of Creative at performing rights organization BMI, where he worked for over 14 years. Is that correct? 14?
Yeah, 25 total.
25 total.
I worked there 3 different times, so the last stint was 14.
So 25 total. Recently, Jody's moved on to Jody Williams Songs, which is a joint publishing venture with Warner Chappell Music Nashville, where they've signed writers and artists like Ashley McBride, Nathan Chapman, Jeremy Spillman, Greg Bates, and Pat McLaughlin. And in his career, his love for music publishing was always apparent. Between his stints at working at BMI, Jody Williams was drawn into the publishing world as president of the Nashville division of MCA Music Publishing, among many other publishing opportunities. They thrived under his leadership, emerging as one of the Nashville's most awarded publishers, and that's not all. Jody also serves on the boards of the Country Music Association, the CMA, and is a trustee on the Country Music Hall of Fame. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for Jody. So I'm so ready to learn from Jody and his many years of experience. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. Did I get all that right?
You did.
Okay. Very, very cool. So as a Nashville native, the music biz was kind of right in front of your eyes growing up. What inspired you to kind of jump in and become a part of it?
I think my next door neighbor was a guy, and he's still a dear friend, Billy Crane. He was my next door neighbor. He's a year older than me, and his big brother was always in bands, and we just kind of wanted to be like Tommy Crane, who was his big brother. And so this was in grade school. This was like fifth and sixth grade. We played little combos and, just parties for our friends and that type of thing. Yeah. So from that point forward, I really knew that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know what form it would take. I really wanted to be a songwriter and a guitar player in somebody's band. Mm-hmm. That appealed to me all the way through my first year of college, really. And then things turned. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us about, you mentioned that you were kind of have had multiple stints at BMI. Tell us about your time there.
Well, I went to school at the University of Denver for 1 year, and school was really never my thing. I got in a bluegrass band out there, wanted to come back to Nashville and open a record store. I'd been working for a company called Peaches Records, which was a big chain back in the mid-'70s through probably the early 80s. And they would take like big grocery stores, supermarkets, and they would be record stores. So I wanted to come back and open up a retail, record store at that time. My dad, who is very entrepreneurial, was all about it, but he said, we don't really know anything about the music business. But, Frances, because you went to school with David and Donnie Preston, her sons. They were really good friends, so I would hang out at the Preston's house when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And my dad suggested that I go talk to Frances just to get some advice. So I did, and I went and saw Mrs. Preston at her office. And I was 20 years old. And basically, she suggested that we're about to go into a recession. People don't buy as much in a recession, especially music. They're going to buy food before they buy music. You should probably wait on this. I mean, there's probably a better time to start a business like this. And by the way, you could intern here. We pay our interns, and you can sort of like have a paid internship here. And I thought, well, that's not really what I want to do, but said, but thank you, and I'll let you know. So I went back and when I left there, I was going back to where I was living, and I thought on the way back to there, I thought, this was probably a setup. This was probably my dad, maybe didn't really want to do this, but wanted to see me learn and all that.
Sure.
So I did take her advice, and I did go to work in the mailroom as an employee. It wasn't an internship at all. It turned out to be just a entry level position in the mailroom.
Wow.
So, and I worked there for almost 2 years like that, and it was there that I learned. I would always read my liner notes, and I knew what BMI and ASCAP did, but I just working at the record store. I just became more curious about all the backroom part of the music business.
Sure.
And at BMI, you quickly learn what publishing's all about. You quickly learn about the income stream and who gets that money, and how songwriters can leverage portions of their publisher share while holding on to their writer's share, and all you learn that really quickly there, and learn who all these people are in the fine print on these album jackets. So I back in those days, I was still writing songs, and I was playing dobro in a couple of bands, and doing demos, and played on a few demo sessions and all that type of thing. But when I saw the path of publishing, I thought that's probably where I need to go. So when I realized that, what had happened, since I got back from Denver, was that my older sister, ended up marrying Tommy Crane, my best friend's big brother that we were trying to emulate in our bands. So Tommy had the good fortune of being selected by Charlie Daniels as his new lead guitar player, and this was right before Charlie. This was like 2 or 3 years before Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Wow.
Okay. So I met, I was really great friends with Tommy. Now Tommy's my brother-in-law. Tommy introduces me to Charlie, and Charlie says, well, I want somebody to run my publishing company. And I was kind of ready to get out of the mailroom at BMI. I wanted to see what that was all about.
Sure.
So I went to work for Charlie Daniels, basically just trying to pitch the songs that he wasn't cutting. And my office was at Sound 70 Productions, which is one of the premier concert production companies in the Southeast. And they did all of the shows at the Municipal Auditorium, and they did them in Huntsville, Alabama, and just different towns around this area. So it was management and concert production, and a tiny little desk drawer publishing company that I was in charge of, making next to nothing.
Sure.
But a little bit more than I was making at BMI.
Yeah.
So while I was up there, this was sort of the beginning. It was sort of the heyday of Southern rock. So there, Joe Sullivan and Steve Greel operated the management company, and so they had the Henry Paul Band, and they had Dobie Gray, and they had Wet Willie, some of these, Capricorn Records, Southern rock acts.
Yeah.
And I got to know all those guys, and just loved that music. And I just, loved all of the Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker, Charlie Daniels. I was just in all the way, and just that was my thing. And in the meantime, I did get a few of Charlie's songs recorded, but none became big hits.
Yeah.
But I got to learn about pitching songs and being selective, and really I was out there representing Charlie Daniels, and so when I think about how good he was to me, it's just amazing what a shot he gave me, and what he and Francis Preston really put me on a trajectory for my career.
Wow, man. Well, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Very time of recording this. He's just passed away.
That's right.
I guess it was a month ago or 2 months ago now.
About 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just one of the most incredible humans I've ever met, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing that he kind of helped you get your start doing that. So,
Yeah.
So that was publishing, and then you ended up back at BMI. What kind of made you want to sort of jump back into that world?
Well, the cool thing about the Nashville publishing community is that we all need each other.
Yeah.
Like I need to be doing business with you, and hopefully you need to be doing business with me.
Yeah.
But if you have an act that you're producing, and I think that maybe it's a good idea that one of my writers writes with your act, so we depend on each other.
Sure.
So at Sound 70, when I was running Charlie's publishing company, I became a member of this group of publishers that we all were having our writers co-write together. But Sound 70 was not focused on publishing. They were not going to grow the company. We were not going to hire any more employees. We were not going to have staff writers and all of that.
Sure.
So I began to look for a job. I worked for Charlie for 3 years. Then I went to work for Charlie Feldman at Screen Gems Music, which later became EMI Music. But Screen Gems was a great publishing company here. And I went to work for Charlie, and I worked there for 2 years, pitching songs, better staff of writers. And I sort of went on. I wouldn't suggest this for any really young person. This was my path, and it happened to work out for me. But I really wouldn't. Yeah. It sounds a little irresponsible, kind of what I did. But every couple of years, I would change jobs for a little bit more money to work with a better staff of writers. And so I went. After about 2 years with Screen Gems, I went to Chappell Music. They were the ASCAP Publisher of the Year just year after year. And so I worked with Rory Burke and Charlie Black and Rafe Van Hoy and Lang Martine. And it was like, wow, that was the company where I went, man, this is what it's like to have like racehorses walking in the office every day. And you're representing them, and you better have your game face on.
Sure.
And it was so much fun, so much fun. And so I got a little bit more notoriety in terms of just my ability to play songs and whatnot, and I got a job at Tree Publishing Company. And so this was the mid-'80s by that time, early to mid-'80s. And I only worked there for a couple of years. But while I was there, that was by, in those days, and even today, Sony Tree has the most historic catalog of any publishing company. Sure. Sony ATV in town. So back then, I got to work with Curly Putman and Harlan Howard and Bobby Braddock and Jamie O'Hara and all, these Hall of Fame guys. Yeah. Before they were becoming the Hall of becoming the Hall of Fame guys, but they weren't in yet. And anyway, it was just incredible learning experience because they had so many writers. I mean, they had like 100 writers. Yeah. So it was and a huge creative staff. 5 or 6 creative people. So, in those days, it was less about co-writing and more about just writers who weren't artists coming in and trying to write a better song than Harlan Howard that day. Sure. So the bar was really high. And you got to see how that played out and how that inspired the younger writers who were getting their first shot as songwriters. Yeah. While I was there, I became friends with Jamie O'Hara. Sort of the great thing that happened was Jamie O'Hara wrote a song called "Grandpa Tell Me About the Good Old Days" for the Judds. Yeah. So he came in one day with a cassette and said, "I wrote this song, and what do you think?" And I said, I'm going to go find Brent Mayer and play it for him. Wow. And so that later became one of their big songs, which was so much fun working with guys like Jamie O'Hara. And I mean, there's a guy who wrote the song 100% by himself. It was just like solitary, incredible sound. It sounds like it was written by one person with a solitary focus. Wow. But that was sort of the fun highlight of my days there. But I got a call to come back and to BMI and be a writer rep. So this was 86 to 95. Sure. I was a writer rep, which was sort of the heyday of country music. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was so much fun doing that. Yeah. And being there at that time. It was I started learning about Christian music during that stint at BMI. but really focused mainly. We had a gentleman named Joe Mascao who ran the Christian side of things. So
Sure.
I wasn't really in that as much as I was the country side of things.
Sure.
But it was the days of Brooks and Dunn and that whole era.
Yeah.
The class of '89.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back then there were like 40% of the, compared to today, about 40% of the voices on country radio were women. And it was just so much more diverse.
Wow.
In terms of of female voices, for sure. But just great music and great bands, and the songwriting bar was really high, really high.
Yeah.
So I did that until '95, and I got a call to come run MCA Music Publishing, which later became Universal Publishing. So I went over there, and that was I'd always wanted to run one of the big companies in. At that point in my career at BMI, I thought, wouldn't it be great to run one of the major companies' Nashville office, and then wouldn't it be great to run the creative office of BMI? I thought sometime later in my career I'd love to do that.
So you kind of had those two things in your.
Well, they were in the back of my mind. They were and I never wanted to start my own company. I never wanted to do anything like that. I mean, I loved working for a team. I loved reporting to somebody.
Sure.
I mean, I had no problem with that. So I went to work for MCA Music Publishing. I was there for 4 years. And Gary Burr was the big writer at that time, and we bought some catalogs. We were ASCAP Publisher of the Year, one or two of those years, but just had a great run at MCA, and then they merged with Polygram.
Yeah.
And when they merged with Polygram, a few of us lost our jobs. So about 3 of us at MCA lost our jobs, and about 3 people at Polygram lost their jobs. And that's when they hired a guy named Pat Higdon. They bought his catalog that he'd been building and hired him to run the merged office.
Sure.
And so there I was, kids, going into high school. I mean, in grade school, it's like.
Sure.
And no job. And so I thought, well, this is, I've worked everywhere. I know all these people. I'm just going to call Francis back or Roger Sovine back and see if I can go back to BMI.
Sure.
So BMI didn't need anybody. ASCAP didn't need anybody. And like songwriters were calling me saying, would you just pitch my songs? And I was like, I'm trying to get a job right now. So I'll get back to you,
Yeah.
So I finally went to go see, my former employer, Donna Hilly, at Sony Tree.
Yeah.
And I said, Donna, I'm just, she didn't need anybody. And she said, Jody, look, all of your relationships and all of your skill set is working with songwriters. So, God is opening this door for you. And I know you don't want to do it because you don't want to have your own company, and that's not part of your plan. It's probably part of His plan for you.
Wow.
So you have to take that seriously. That's all of you've got everything you need to have a company and make it be successful. And I did not believe that.
Wow.
But because she said that, it certainly planted a seed in my mind. And so I thought, okay, so I went home and I told my wife all this, and she was like, okay, I mean, that really makes sense, but she was skeptical too.
Sure.
But I had no other options.
Sure.
I mean, I could sit around and drive around all day and not look for a job, but I had gone everywhere to look for a job.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm going to go do this. I took some money out of savings, and I told my wife that I would, by the time this chunk of money has been spent, I will either have a joint venture and somebody else will be paying the bills for this company, or I'll get a job.
Yeah.
Or I'll do something. I'll go to another line of work or something.
Yeah.
So
this was kind of like your last resort at the time.
This was my last resort.
Yeah.
So the way, back 20 years ago when you did this, you opened an office, you hung a sign out on Music Row, and I did that. I mean, today you don't necessarily have to do that.
Sure.
But back then, that's the way I thought you had to do it. So I leased a small office on 17th, put a sign out, still not with zero confidence that this was going to work.
Sure.
Okay. But the moment that I was signing a lease for a year on this office suite, and when the pen left the paper from me signing that, something just clicked in me.
Wow.
It was either divine or it was probably just, I don't know what it was. It was all of the above.
Yeah.
But I said to myself, I'm going to make this work. This is going to work.
Yeah.
This is not maybe going to work. This is going to work.
Yeah.
And I never really looked back from there. And I had that company for 7 years. And the funny thing is, just one thing after the other, just by virtue of hanging the sign out there and having people call, I met just incredible things happened during that 7-year period. I hired an intern from Belmont. She was a senior, and I knew her from a family at our church that we were going to. And so I hired her as an intern. Her name was Catherine Blassingame. So she comes in, and she's helping me get organized. And she finally, after a few weeks, she said, you're seeing a lot of these singers and writers that are coming in. Said, there's a kid that I go to school with that you ought to know. I mean, he's a better singer than any of these people that are coming in here. And I said, well, bring him in here. So that was Josh Turner. So Catherine brings in Josh Turner. He had like 2 nights before had written Long Black Train. Yeah. So he sits in my office. He plays Long Black Train. And I'm just like, wow. Yeah. I mean, this guy sang better than anybody I'd ever heard. Yeah. Perfect pitch.
Wow.
100% written song by himself from inspiration. He's deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I said, I don't know if you have any other songs in you, but boy, I bet we can probably get you a record deal with the way, if you sound like that.
Wow.
So we worked with him for several months. And then, all during the first part of all of this, I bought a catalog with Sony called King Lizard. And that was Liz Rose's catalog that she was a partner in. They had that company for a couple of years, and then they ran out of money. And I had met Liz. I can't remember how I exactly met Liz, but I hired her to pitch the catalog after I bought it. And I wanted to sign a girl that wrote for that company named Kim Patton Johnston. Kim McLean is what she goes by now. Yeah. And so I started listening to those songs, and I saw that Liz's name was on some of these songs in the catalog. And I said, Liz, I didn't know you were a writer. She said, I didn't write those songs. Those writers just being nice to me. I was just working. I was just working with them like publishers do with writers to help their songs get better.
Yeah, like, why don't you change this?
Yeah, why don't you change it? Yeah. So I said, oh, okay. So then I get deeper into the catalog, and like her name's on like a bunch of songs, and I said, Liz. And then I asked Kim. I said, Kim, did Liz really write this stuff? Yeah, totally. Yes, she's a writer. Wow. So I said, Liz, this was several months had passed, and I said, I don't really need you to pitch the catalog anymore, but I'll pay you twice as much to write. And she was like, I don't want to write. I'm a publisher. I'm much more comfortable there. That's a more steady stream of income for me. Sure. She had kids. And I said, I don't need you to pitch the catalog. So you either, why don't you just try this, for a year. Try it for a year. So she comes in, and pretty quickly, she becomes this entity. Yeah. And people wanted to write with her and Kim. Artists wanted to write with her and Kim. And then Liz on her own would just she just loved writing with young artists that nobody wanted to pay any attention to. Sure. I mean, there was just a stream of these kids coming through the office. And I finally said, we're not really getting your songs cut when you're writing them with these kids, And she said, well, this is kind of what I want to do. And I said, okay, that's cool. I wasn't paying her hardly anything.
Sure.
So one of the kids that she started writing with was Taylor Swift. Just one of the many.
Yeah.
But she really latched on to Taylor, and they had a thing, and I couldn't see it. Taylor was taking up more and more of Liz's time, and the songs were okay, but there were no teenagers on any radio, any format really. Yeah. You know, it was all, and Taylor was like 15 then. So we loved it when Taylor would come to the office like twice a week to write. You know, she'd get out of school, she'd come in, or either her mom or dad would sit there in our little lobby and wait for them to get finished. They'd write till about 7 at night. They'd come in and play me songs, and I was always, I think, encouraging, but I still didn't get it. And I thought, and she had a development deal at RCA that she'd just been let go from her development deal at RCA. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, okay, she doesn't have her development deal at RCA anymore. And, I said, Liz, I don't know. You should really think about this. And she said, we're about to turn a corner. I can just feel it. Mm-hmm. And Liz was exactly right. Probably a week or two later, they turned in a song called Come In With the Rain that I thought, well, this is really good. I said, Taylor could do this, but it felt a little mature for me. So I thought, maybe Faith Hill could do this.
Sure.
But I thought, hey, it's a great song. And then the next song they came in with was that song, Tim McGraw. And I thought, this sounds just like Taylor Swift. This sounds exactly like what a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid would say.
Yeah.
The way they would say it.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, and then I began to see it. Then I sort of looked at the other songs that I didn't get at first, and I was beginning to get it. Next thing you know, she's signed by Scott Borchetta. During that time, I signed a girl named Stephanie Chapman. Really believed in, still do, believe in her as a writer and an artist. Yeah. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I got her husband, Nathan, along for the ride. He was like a budding demo producer,
Yeah.
And his parents are Steve and Annie Chapman, who are artists that were at the forefront of the whole contemporary Christian music scene. Yeah. I mean, just from the very beginning. So Nathan grew up playing in their band on the road and stuff like that when he was a kid.
Wow.
I later learned all that. But I met Nathan immediately, just loved Nathan. I mean, Nathan and I became fast friends.
Sure.
And he was not writing songs. He was just, and I gave him this, we had a little shack in the back of our office. It was like a one-car garage. And he converted it into a studio, and he started doing all my demos back there. So our writers would write a song, I'd call up Nathan, give him the work tape, and he'd go back there and build the track.
Yeah. So
when Liz and Taylor started really getting on a roll, he would just go back there and demo every single song. Like the day they wrote it, by the end of the day, the next day, the track was done, and Taylor would go back in and sing it. And Nathan would do the harmonies and play all the guitar, do all that. Yeah. So then she gets signed by Scott Borchetta. They called another producer, a great producer, to cut sides on her. And Taylor didn't like it as well as what Nathan had been doing, and convinced Scott Borchetta to let Nathan do the project. Yeah. So he did. Yeah. I mean, this was so speculative. Yeah. I mean, Taylor Swift was not Taylor Swift. Sure. In these days at all. And so, I guess just the end of that story is the rest is history. Right. I mean, it just kept building and building and building. But the lessons I learned a lot from Catherine Blassingame. I learned a lot, I still do to this day, from Liz Rose. Yeah. I've learned so much from Taylor Swift and watching her career and watching how she knows who her audience is and who she is, probably as good as any artist that I've ever seen. Yeah. And then Nathan Chapman. I've just watched what that work ethic and talent can do. And years later, he started writing songs, and then that turned into a great career for him too.
Yeah.
So that was all great. One thing I'm sitting here talking about the people who've inspired me.
Yeah.
When I was working in the mailroom, I'm going to go back for just a second. When I was working in the mailroom at BMI, I walked out of the mailroom one day, and there was this cute blonde girl behind at the receptionist desk, and I said, who are you? And her name was Karen, and we became just great friends. We were the same age, and she had dated David Preston in high school, and I'd always heard of her, but I never met her in high school. And so all of a sudden, we're kind of thrown in there together.
Sure.
We become great friends, and basically, a couple of years after that, got married. We've been married for 42 years, and met there at BMI. And when I talk about the people who've inspired me and who have been every step of the way with me in my career, all these moves I've made, it's her.
Yeah.
And she's always said, "Go do that," or no, we ought to leave that alone, or whatever. She'll let me go meander through the process, but no greater guide that I've had in my career than her.
Yeah,
for sure.
Congratulations! Thanks for sharing that. 42 years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. So then when So Sony, I get a call from Sony one day, and Sony says, we're getting rid of all of our joint ventures. So they're pulling all the funding from my company.
Yeah.
And we were just now, when you have an independent company, you're digging a hole with money.
Sure.
Hoping to fill it back up, and then you either make money when your company really has enough critical mass and income to sustain itself. Or you sell it and do a go forward with your buyer.
Yeah.
And so
can we stop there real quick? Just no listener left behind. I think these are really powerful concepts, and would be awesome just to really unpack that. Can you maybe explain a little bit more, like, okay, what's a joint venture, and then what's a how does somebody go about selling a catalog, and what is a go forward? Some of those terms that you just mentioned.
Well, for instance, the company I have right now is a joint venture with Warner Chappell. Warner Chappell pays for all of my writer advances, demo costs, recording costs, things like that. My overhead, my office, my employees, my travel, all of that stuff is out of my pocket. Yeah. So it's a true joint venture. The larger part of the money outlay is really Warner Chappell, because those advances can get to be sizable. Sure. But if you have 8 or 9 writers, even if they're small amounts of money, it turns out to be a big amount of money. Yeah. Yeah. So you have to have enough songs out there earning income to pay down all that debt that you owe your joint venture partner. And if you don't, what you can do is, in the marketplace, you can sell your catalog for a multiple of its annual earnings. Let's say it's a 8 to 15 multiple, depending on the hits in there. Yeah. And the company buys your catalog, and so you get your payday, and they say, we'll go forward with you. Like, we'll continue to pay your writer advances. And these days they don't pay overhead. Yeah. For your employees and your office and all that. Yeah. So that's kind of that concept. It's the great thing is you have a partner. Sony was a great partner, and Warner Chappell is an incredible partner for me right now, because you get creative help, you get they do all your administration, they're paying your writer bills. Yeah. It's just a great way to go.
Yeah. So if somebody's wanting to go into the publishing business and start a publishing company, whether or not it's a good or a bad time to do that right now, we could talk a little bit about that, but they pretty much have to know that those are the two ways that you can kind of make money, is either in the catalog sale or, like you said, you hit critical mass and the royalties that are coming in are kind of sustaining you.
That's right. And so I've always, my dad kind of raised me to, like, it's okay, try not to spend as little of your own money as you can. Yeah. In other words, it's okay to own 50%. Yeah. Don't feel like you've got to own 100% of the whole thing. Find a partner. You do the sweat equity and let somebody else put up the money. And so, like when I started my publishing company the first time, to get that little amount of money out of savings was a big deal to me.
Sure.
It felt like 10 times that amount that I took out.
Yeah.
Mainly just because that's how I came up. But
sure.
Yeah. So Sony calls and says we're getting rid of all of our joint ventures, and this was sort of the advent of digital music, and sales were dipping, beginning to dip. And so, I get why they did that. It used to be you could have 25 years ago, you could have an album cut on a gold or platinum album and it would pay for 2 developing writers at your publishing company.
Yeah.
So those, we began moving towards a singles-driven type business. Mm-hmm. So Sony pulls their funding, and I thought, well, I've got to either go find a partner or I can sell the company. And right about that time, I got a call from BMI again saying, would you like to come back and run the creative office at BMI? And I was like...
This was in the back of your head right there.
And
the
I
whole
was,
time.
and at this time, I was really having fun being a publisher too.
Yeah.
But I had not hit critical mass. Taylor Swift had her record deal and she was releasing records, but she had not become Taylor Swift yet.
Sure.
So I decided to take the job at BMI. My kids were still in school. I had not had a job in 7 years, like an income-paying job.
Yeah.
And you're living more frugally.
Sure.
You're not taking nice, really super nice trips and stuff like that. You're just kind of building your business.
Sure.
And but we were raising kids, so it was time to be home and time to be doing all that. It was. I mean, we weren't suffering by any means, but it just became clear that I should probably take this job, and this is God's telling me. You've always kind of wanted to do this. They're giving you your shot. Go do it.
Yeah.
So I did, and I've got 2 boys, Ed and Driver. Driver's the oldest. Ed's 4 years younger, and at that time Ed was still in high school, and Driver was in college, and actually just getting out of college, and neither one of them really they had worked for me in the past, but neither one of them wanted to take on the responsibility of a publishing company. So I put the company up for sale. Mm-hmm. And this was when I finally put it up for sale. Taylor was becoming Taylor, so my catalog had more value than normal.
Sure.
And I ended up selling I took the job at BMI in 2006, and by 2008 I had sold the catalog to Olay, which is a Canadian publisher now called Anthem.
Yeah.
And so they really wanted sort of a tent-pole catalog to build their operation around.
Sure.
So they bought my catalog.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I took the job at BMI, and I felt like it's like walking back home.
Yeah.
I felt completely at ease there. Always have. And just had a great fun run the last 14 years.
Yeah.
And then as a lot of those jobs go, about halfway into that job, about 7 or 8 years into it, I wasn't meeting with songwriters as much and didn't have really anything to do with actual music. Because the job, if you have that role, it's more administrative than it is creative. So I've never considered myself a great administrative person at all.
Sure.
But I learned that. I learned a whole lot about business that I didn't know before. But my heart has always been with working with songwriters and talking with them about their songs and connecting the dots and watching them succeed like that.
Yeah.
So I sort of planned an exit, but it just took a lot longer to get there.
Sure.
And
why did it take longer?
I'm glad it did. Well, I think BMI was happy with me being there. I know my wife was happy with me being there. She wasn't all crazy about me just jumping from that job to go do the speculative thing again.
Yeah.
But I was at a different place in my life and a different place in my career. And so I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And I can't imagine what this community would be like without the music community, without BMI in Nashville. Just incredible.
Yeah.
I always said, we're just trying to keep that ideal alive that Frances Preston created when she opened the office here. And it was carried on by a lot of great people before me. And so,
can you sum up what that is? What is that ideal?
Well, she knew how to properly appreciate songwriters. I mean, she made them feel like they were the most important people. Yeah, the artist was important, but this guy over here who wrote that song may be more important. That was her whole thing. And she knew how to talk to a writer and make them feel that.
Sure.
And I mean, anybody who worked at BMI for Frances watched that unfold daily, no matter who the writer was. I mean, Frances. My view of Frances is that she didn't know a whole hell of a lot about music, but boy, she could pick people. She would pick somebody just based upon their character and sort of their. She just had a feel for them, and then we would watch them just succeed. Yeah. In a huge way.
Yeah.
So she just had great intuition. So we got to all see that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, so obviously, the rest is history, as we said earlier, and you're now running Jody Williams Songs. Can you tell us what jumping from that, secure position at BMI to now you're working back with writers again? What has that been like?
Well, it's just the joy of my life. I mean, I just absolutely love walking into the office and working with Nina, figuring out who should write with who. Then about 3 o'clock every afternoon, writers are getting out of their writes and they're emailing the work tapes in. And I mean, it's just a thrill.
Yeah.
I mean, you know this. It's like your life and the trajectory of your company can change on any given day based upon what comes through
one song.
on the work. One song, and it's, watch out.
Yeah.
And then, and the other cool thing about it, when you have your head down and you're really working hard at this, it's these songs that you never paid much attention to that sort of work for you too. I'm very, at this point in my life, I'm so picky about songs. I mean, I'm so ultra picky about songs. Yeah. So I've got to learn to kind of let it go a little bit and let some of these other songs, not be so critical of them. I have to catch myself because of that.
Yeah.
So leaving BMI and coming back into this, I've got a great partner, Ben Vaughn, who's a great friend of mine who runs Warner Chappell here. He wanted to do this with me, and I'm so glad he did. They're a great partner. And we're coming out of this bro country era of music, and things are changing on the musical landscape.
Yeah.
So we've come out of bro country, and we're coming into another phase of music where there's, I think, a little bit more attention on lyric, a little bit more attention on traditional, a lot more attention on women. I mean, the doors have really opened.
Well, yeah, we just had Zach Cale on here a minute ago, and we were talking about Gabby Barrett. I mean, that's the longest running number one that I can remember.
Crazy.
So it's a different landscape, and you hinted that earlier, that back in the '90s, or the late '80s, you said it was like 40% women on country radio.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening again, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it needs to be better, but we're headed in, like, compared to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
So if we can just stay on this trajectory, we'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But there are so many. I mean, you know this. I mean, people still no songwriter or artist ever did this for money. They do it because they have to do it.
Yeah.
And they still move to Nashville with their dreams. And I think in the past 15 years or so, we haven't done a great job of encouraging that great songwriting. I think we've done a lot of throwing professional writers in with writer artists who are really better artists than they are writers.
Sure.
And we've, in a sense, lowered the bar because of that. Now, that doesn't mean there's not hit music out there. There is hit music out there. But I think we're seeing a little bit more attention paid to the quality of the song. And we've, way back when the music industry started in Nashville, hardly any of the singers were writers. I mean, they just, their producers and their record companies would just say, no, your stuff isn't very good. You're going to sing, Bobby Braddock's song.
So where did that start to shift? I mean, you've watched that.
I think it was always going that way, and then you have artists that really could write. I mean, like Alan Jackson. Alan Jackson's like a great songwriter.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Forget that he ever sang a note. He's a great songwriter. So we had more people because music became more popular 50s and 60s. Everybody thought that they could do that. When the Beatles came along, everybody thought that they could do that.
Yeah.
That's me and a zillion other people. That's our era. And then people got better at it. And then you have people like Taylor Swift who can really write at an early age.
Yeah.
So we've always been headed that way. But I think, the man at the top of the corporation at the music company would always say, I'd rather bet on, the Brill Building or Acuff Rose to get those songs to cut on you.
Sure.
They
just felt like historically
you have a better shot.
Why try to shake it up?
Yeah. So and then then we also see artists who aren't really great writers become great writers.
Yeah.
Then you see guys like Rhett Akins, who was a writer artist, a really good writer when he was young, had a good but short artist career on the radio, become one of the greatest writers in Nashville.
Yeah.
So they come in all forms. But all of that to say, I think everybody's ratcheting up a little bit right now, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, the quality is very high. I think that's for people who are maybe on the outside considering a career in music, I think just the bar is so incredibly high, and as Jody's talking about, it's getting higher by the day. So you're going to have to write a lot of songs to get to that hit, Maybe probably even more now than you ever did before.
That's right. No, it's true. It's watching Liz Rose. She wrote, 300 or 400 songs a year. You want to know?
Insanity.
You want to know one of the reasons why Liz Rose is so successful is that
she's prolific.
She's prolific, and she's not afraid to work. She's not afraid to outwork everybody on the street.
Yeah, that's more than a lot of writers will write in their lifetime.
Yeah.
That she does in 1 year. That's amazing. So, what did you learn? I want to kind of fast forward to now. What did you learn at BMI that sort of translates to what you do now with Jody Williams Songs?
Well, I think it's all relationship based. I mean, it goes back to kind of what we learned from Francis. You never know, who you're going to be doing business with next. You never know what writer is going to be let go from his deal, who's going to walk into your office, and you'll be looking for a deal, and you want to sign him. You just never know. So in this community, if you get sideways with somebody, it's best that you work it out really quick, because 6 weeks later, that person's going to come back around, or you're going to want to have a piece of business that only that person can do with you.
Yeah.
So I love that whole kind of no matter what, let's all get along and let's all do a lot of business together.
Yeah.
And so at BMI, there's so much volume. I mean, at BMI, you walk in and there's emails and there's texts and the phone's ringing off the hook. And you're taking care of, literally hundreds of thousands of writers.
Yeah.
Who if they have a question that day, you have to be leaning on yes when you work at a PRO. You have to. It's like the electric company.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to pick up. You can't not answer your phone.
Yeah.
You have to return the email. You have to answer somebody's question. You have to give them help to the best of your ability. And so you learn how to manage all that at BMI. So you learn how to manage volume, And I'm glad to not have that volume in my life now. I've got sort of more of my bandwidth back to pour into creative.
Sure.
Which is fun for me. But I learned how to take care of people. I learned how to take care of people, period.
Yep.
If you won't last long at a PRO if you don't do that.
Sure. Well, that's good. So before we jump into our lightning round and we kind of wrap up for today, I want to hear, is there anything that you're working on with your company, particular writers, particular projects, anything that you'd like to share?
You know, I think it's so early on right now.
Yeah, you guys started, just for people who are listening, this is 6 months ago, right?
We started March 1st, which was kind of the start date of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, that's a whole nother crazy part of the story. But no, the 5 writers that I have, Nathan Chapman is working with probably 4 or 5 different artists. And that's his business.
Yeah.
You know, more than it's my business, because those artists are not my writers.
Sure.
And so he's writing with them, so it becomes our business.
Sure.
So he's very busy doing that. Jeremy Spillman is, he just had an Eric Church single this summer. Mm-hmm. I mean, Greg Bates is working with this group called Sutherland that's River House, Sony Music. Their single was released 2 weeks ago. Awesome. We're really excited about that. I'm really excited about Greg and Sutherland right this second.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Pat McLaughlin is writing with everybody under the sun, from all through the Americana genre into country. Ashley McBride, the thing I'm most excited about, probably that comes to mind right now, is watching her come into our office about 3 days a week, wanting to write songs, and her not hold them for herself. She wants to get cuts on other people, and she wants to be put in better writers' rooms. And of course, everybody wants to write with her, so that's not hard to do.
Sure.
But what's hard to do is to find an artist that's as successful as she is and as she's becoming. And we've had this pandemic where she can't go on the road, so she's poured her energy into writing songs. So now we've got this wonderful little catalog of songs from the last 6 months that we would have probably never had, or we would have had a lot fewer songs.
Sure. Yeah.
So she's just this. It's just a pleasant surprise. She works so hard and she's so great, and she wants to write hits for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So it's this whole time's been so interesting, and like you said, we could go off on a whole tangent about the pandemic and what it's done for the music business. But for publishers, that's kind of what I've been hearing is, this is the time that people have to write songs now. So where they maybe were touring 300 shows a year before. But are you ready to jump in the lightning round?
Sure.
Do you play any instruments?
I do.
What instruments?
I play primarily guitar, but I played dobro in a bluegrass band years ago, so I still dabble in that.
Awesome.
Play a little keyboard.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Favorite song you wish you published?
Wow. Favorite song I wish I published? Probably That's the Way Love Goes by Merle Haggard. I'm not sure that Merle wrote that, though. I think that may have been another writer, or he co-wrote it with somebody, but I absolutely love that song.
Okay. That's a good answer. Are you a morning person or night person?
I'm a morning person. For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's a song that you loved when you were growing up?
I would say, Ticket to Ride by the Beatles. I would also say most any Lynyrd Skynyrd song, to be honest with you. I mean, all the Southern rock stuff is so special to me.
That's awesome.
There you go.
And lastly, your favorite vegetable.
My favorite vegetable. Seth, no wonder you get paid the big bucks coming up with a question like that. Asparagus.
All right. There you go. We have a lot of that in my house.
Okay.
My girls actually love it. We've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Oh, man.
They love salmon and asparagus, so I'm glad they're on a healthy track.
That's cool.
Hey, Jody, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. Is there anything that you'd like to kind of leave with people before we sign off and jump into our deep dive, which is going to be all about advice specifically for songwriters. Again, people can check that out at madeitmusic.com. But before we do that, is there anything that you'd like to leave people with?
Just, all I can say is as you meander through your career, you're going to circle back to that person that maybe said no to you, that you didn't feel should have said no to you. They're always going to be there to circle back around to when you become more of an entity at what you do in music. So just don't take all that stuff to heart, because it can manifest itself into something positive down the road. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. So good. Jody, thank you so much for being on the Made It Music podcast.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
All the links for Jody Williams Publishing Company are going to be in the show notes, as well as social media and all of that good stuff. So thanks again.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What's up? Thank you for watching the Made It Music podcast season 3. If you want to check out any of the other episodes from season 3, click up here. And we talk in the show about these really cool deep dives with all this extra bonus content. And if you want access to all of those, click here.